everyone, and welcome back to Security in the 21st Century. I'm Suzanne Loftus, and I'm pleased to have with me on the show today Dr. Josef Braml, the head of the Americas program at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Suzanne, thank you and the Marshall Center for this opportunity to exchange views.
Joseph has recently written something fascinating on the European Union in the Corona world economic crisis and shared his perspectives and options in the geoeconomic competition between the US and China as well. This has been written for the Hans Seidel Foundation. And I thought it'd be perfect for this video podcast series as it matches all the main themes of our initiative here of great power competition, transatlantic relations, and disinformation campaigns. So I thought I'd ask Joseph several questions about it, starting with China. And at the beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, China's response and the way that it dealt with the crisis and the way it communicated the crisis to the international community received a lot of scrutiny and criticism. So in your opinion, how has this affected the view that the European Union and the United States has on China? Have they significantly changed their mind about China, or was this always an issue for them in the past?
Suzanne, that's a key question. We thought we would come closer, work together to solve this epidemic, to really cope with this epidemic, but the opposite happened. Corona reinforced existing rivalries, especially between the US and China. So we had a geoeconomic rivalry going on, and this has been reinforced. You mentioned China. They have been suppressing domestic uproar, which might have happened by being aggressive abroad. Likewise, Trump was doing the same to distract from his failures. He blamed China also for spreading the virus in the United States of America, which was due to his mismanagement, and he thought he would lose the election. And I think thanks to the corona pandemic, he lost the election to Biden. But to prevent that, he was portioning blame. And here we go. We have now a heavy China bashing contest that was not only limited to the Trump campaign, but also to the Biden campaign. And this will be going on, and Europe will be right in the middle. And it's true, you asserted to it. Europe has come closer to America, but it is on the spot now, and Europe has to decide either this side or that side, and not many Europeans are even aware of that pressure that will even hit Europe in the case of a Biden administration, which will we see.
So to follow up just a little bit, though, the European Union prior to this didn't necessarily see China as a serious threat, more of a competitor, perhaps, but saw economic opportunity in China. But did the mishandling of the way that the information was shared give the European Union a kind of a letdown on how much they could trust China, and then made them kind of officially have a more antagonistic stance towards them?
Yeah, that's the official parlance of the day. I don't think that really mattered that much in the end. It's business, and many business organizations, companies have realized when the Chinese say win-win, they have screwed them twice. So the business community has been waking up. They now talk about a level playing field, and BDI, the German Industries Association, was first, and now policymakers are following suit. So they want the level playing field, and that's the name of the game. Everything else has reinforced that. Yes, our supply chains are vulnerable. We could not trust Chinese delivery, but again, in Europe, our values weren't that true either. So we also blocked delivery of some medical devices from one European country to another one. So that's probably not the main reason. The main reason is business. The business of Europe is business, to use a famous American word.
And so the order of the day has been, economic interdependence, liberal democracy. The thinking was that interlinking the world like this would lead to benefits for everyone. And to take a direct quote from you, in the increasingly dominant geoeconomic thinking of world powers, economic interdependence and the global division of labor are no longer necessarily guarantors of prosperity and peace. So, in your opinion, why has that changed?
I think China has been engaging in this decoupling, what we now accuse America of, but they have been decoupling for some time now, the Chinese, long before the US and the Trump even pushed its version of deglobalization. US strategic planners, and that will continue also in the Biden administration, don't want China to take over. You have a kind of a Sputnik moment in the US. US planners are alert, whether it's rightly so, we will see, but they think China will take over, and they don't want China to be helped economically to rise militarily. So we see that already in the geotech area where America is pushing hard for decoupling, and we will see much more of that. So we went from win-win logic to zero-sum logic. Now government is intervening, also the US government, not only the Chinese government on its side, politically to manage or manipulate data, trade, energy, financial flows through secondary sanctions. And this interplay forces market players to, adhere to the powers as they are. This is not free market any longer. This is geoeconomics. So the economic tools are weaponized. This is a different logic. Not many economists really understand what's going on right now.
Yes, and the pandemic reinforced some of these beliefs, especially when there was a shortage of equipment, heavily needed equipment all over the world, and too much reliance on China and Chinese production and manufacturing. So some say that we're likely to see deglobalization or re-regionalization of supply chains, or more locally based economies. What do you foresee the future like in those terms?
I agree with your assessment. The pandemic has reinforced this deglobalization. More companies, even without government pressure, be it from the United States or from their own Western governments, are now trying to gain resilience. That's a new keyword. In the good old days, we were more for efficiency, such as the previously internationally networked just-in-time production, of which my alma mater in Passau is very famous of. They came up with most of those ideas, but now that's gone. Efficiency is gone. Resilience is the new buzzword, and also the new logic, and that means nearshoring, reshoring, or localization. In other words, Western companies are moving their supply chains out of China. Back home, and some industries, especially in the tech and pharmaceutical sectors, you mentioned Corona, they will come under even more pressure and hear from governments in the US and elsewhere to do the same. So Washington especially will have a keen eye on some supply chains, especially in the technological and military area, to become a lot more independent from China.
This organization allowed a lot of benefits for the United States in the past, and also it led to the rise of China. So how is this lack of interdependence going to affect the global power competition there, great power competition as we call it?
Before the financial crisis 2008, I think the world was in order, at least from an American perspective. Globalization was good. America dominated the rules and benefited from it. But globalization came to an abrupt end 2008 when the Washington Consensus broke, first and foremost in the US. I mean, that was the logical reason for Trump's electoral success later on. And since then, Americans and on both sides of the political spectrum have been pushing against globalization, and Trump especially thought, those global rules, those globalists, they harm America's interests, and he sought to destroy that rule-based order, which now needs to fix because he thought that only helps America's rivals. Rival number one, Europe, they are worse than the Chinese, and here we have the second one, China. So if you do away with the rule-based order, the referee, it's military might that will be right, and that will be the key for economic advantages. So the US under Trump believed that its power based on economic and military strengths would only be curtailed by multilateral rules, and rules that favor China and Europe from a Trumpian perspective. So Trump, from a European perspective, was seen as the one who is a huge threat to the multilateral system, even worse than the Chinese leadership. But I told my European German countrymen, don't be too enthusiastic about China's hunger for a rule-based system, because if you see Beijing as a more reliable partner for the reform of the WTO, World Trade Organization, for example, you may have to think twice. You overlook China's equally opportunistic interpretation of multilateralism, which is a far cry and fundamentally different from Europe's understanding of a rule-based understanding. So in Europe, we tend to believe the rule of law is important. We have to believe it because we don't have military muscle. So we hope Biden administration now helps us to repair that order, but that order could be beyond repair.
And so, of course, there's been some contentious relationships, across the world in the last several years, especially with China. But how about the idea of rapprochement with China? Is that off the table, or would that not help the situation, or would it just make things worse?
Suzanne, you're talking to a transatlanticist who has been criticizing America for some time now, and I think the reasons are obvious, because the outgoing president, the hopefully outgoing president, hasn't been true to transatlantic values and Western values to begin with. So, but still, there is life, there's transatlantic life after Trump, and I'm still a transatlanticist. And I would have even said, even if Trump had been re-elected, and we were closer than many people now make us believe, we would have to stand with America. And there are two clear reasons. The first one is value distance between Europe and China is huge. And the other thing is we are heavily dependent. Even if we didn't like Americans that much, I mean, we should be pragmatic. We are heavily dependent in terms of military and secret services from the United States of America. That rapprochement with China, or even, some would have it an equidistance, so being equally distanced between the two is in no way an option. So, and I also think this whole idea of a third way, of a Sinatra doctrine, as we heard from Brussels, is just Scooby-Doo. We should face realities and stop singing a song that has nothing to do with the real world.
Yeah, and they've often said that the European continent is the battleground for great power competition. How would you say that the EU is particularly vulnerable to divide and conquer strategies, both of China and the United States? And what could the EU do to be a truly global player in today's world?
Those lofty terms, I mean, the third way, as we just spoke, or another version of this song is strategic independence, for those who'd like to have it more seriously, or autonomy. I mean, that's just camouflage. I mean, that just conceals the lack of the EU's ability to decide, to make decisions, and to act. And this would be urgently needed, because as you alluded to, I mean, we are vulnerable to divide and conquer, not only from China's side. I mean, 17 plus 1, or before it was 16 plus 1, is divide and conquer, which has been dividing Europe, and Trump was very successful too. So as long as we are vulnerable, we will be victim of that big geoeconomic contest that's coming up, and we need to overcome that, and to do that we need to be able to decide. So to be a global player and to act, but we need qualified majority voting, and not this illusion of unanimity. I mean, that's not even not even most churches and religion players, if you look at the Catholic Church, are on the unanimity rule. I mean, there ought to be some hierarchical element and some decision making. Time is ripe. I hope Brussels will get out of shooby-doo and face reality.
Well, yes, because it's definitely a way for China to kind of get in and influence certain nations in Europe, who will then have their vote influenced the way that they blocked human rights vote. China owns most of the port of Piraeus, and so that was a highly influential part of Greece's stance on that decision as well. So that would be a great opportunity to have more to stand for the EU to stand together in the face of these divide and conquer challenges, of course. Also, the problem, though, as everyone knows, is that there's the coronavirus has ignited an economic crisis and debt crises, and there's going to be a lot of issues with that in the future. So in terms of security priorities and military relations and between the United States and Europe, do you see that this is going to be problematic? Will the United States demand more economic compensation? How could the EU respond in such a case if the goal is to stay to have a strong transatlantic relationship, and for the EU to also be somewhat independent? They'll need these resources. How do you see that unfolding?
I think the economic situation in the US has been dire for quite some time now. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't have been elected. Some have a very solid income, have stock market fortunes, but many others don't. And those inequalities have been laid bare with the corona crisis. And the corona crisis has just been exacerbating huge problems also for the US government. We added 3 trillion again last year. Debt, huge debt. That's difficult for the US. So European decision makers should realize how precarious the situation is in the United States. So this economic plight will force even the future government, Biden administration, to say maybe nicer words, but as strict as Trump would have it, and will capitalize on economic and especially military dependence of its allies. So we should not kid ourselves. The US may want to have more compensation for their Pax Americana, and rightly so. So let's stop bullshitting here in Europe and in Germany. We can talk about this and that. We have to put the money where our mouth is, and we have been speaking about that. And beyond that, I think that's even fiercer than in the past, because if we do not provide ourselves with an own military that's ready to engage, we will have to pay tribute for our protector, be it in monetary or trade policy. Though there will be linkages, or horse trading as some will have it, or we call it Kuhhandel in Bavaria. So to achieve goodwill with US, we will have to buy freedom cars. Yes, the Biden administration will be even stronger against Russia as Trump would be, and we will have to buy warplanes. So the F-35 Lockheed's warplane will be on the agenda again, and I think we should make an offer. and make our American protectors happy. But European allies should also remember that the Trump administration has only exacerbated the problems we had before. I remember Bob Gates' speech. He warned Europeans, listen up, he more or less said. Our representatives in Congress, they are representing an anger in the public. They are no longer willing to shoulder the security burdens for you. Some even called us welfare bums. We don't spend money on the military, spend all on welfare. So there has been quite some time, some uneasiness in the American public, Congress, and administration about our, let's call it, how did Obama call it? Help me. A nasty word we all try to forget. In Germany. So
I'm not quite sure.
Back mind, and I think we should remember that, and but at the same time we could also help Americans with making a bigger calculation. For the last 2 or 3 decades, we enabled America to live beyond its means, to consume beyond its means, to do business beyond its means, and also to have a military financed by, well, debt that has been financed by foreigners, especially also Europeans. So when we make that calculation, we should have a broader look. Without Europeans' export strengths and the capability of financing America's deep markets and America's living beyond its means, America wouldn't have had the opportunity to have that kind of military. So Europe has been financing America's military, but for that, those guys who only do military should a little bit broaden their macroeconomic perspective. And those guys who only do economics should remember the invisible hand of the market works slightly better with the visible fist in the pocket. So we have to learn, geostrategic thinkers have to learn to think the two together. So that's economics and geostrategy. So geoeconomics will be the name of the game to understand this world and to cope with some problems.
It's important to have a strong transatlantic relationship to be able to compete in this geostrategic competition we've been talking about here, faced with China. And as we've all witnessed, a very complicated and eventful election not so long ago in the United States, we can maybe claim that there is a victor, hopefully, at this point in time. Since the relationship with the European Union between the United States and the EU under the Trump administration suffered some diplomatic tensions, are these likely to continue under a Biden administration? When Biden takes office next year, will the relationship improve, or is it contentious based on more structural issues at play that are deeper than who's in office?
Both factors you mentioned at play. Yes, people make a difference, but structure matters too. So the Biden administration and we work together at DGAP with some possible nominees of the Biden cabinet. This could be interesting. Though they will be nicer, that's for sure. The tone will be nicer, and also the worldview is different. Though those people don't, these people are not living in a zero-sum world as Trump did. In Trump's world, there were no allies, there were no friends, there were only American interests at the expense of all the others. That will be changing. So Biden will seek allies, but allies to push against Russia and China, and that's a position we have been talking about that will be difficult for Europe. And another structural element is not only the geoeconomic power play that's going right now, is the lack of resources in the US. So the US will also push for tougher market power conditions. So which Trump also did. So we will see a continuation of economic and military power reinforced to have a competitive advantage. So that's what we were just talking about. I underline it again. So Europeans should realize that they have to pay more for American protection. But here's the deal. I was suggesting also at the Loisach Group's meeting. So if we have to give up our economic interests with China, and we will have to do Huawei 5G is just the beginning in some sensitive areas. So if we have to give up economic and trade interests with China, then for the sake of security, then we should be able to trust security. So no future chancellors should go in a Bavarian beer tent and worry about America's protection. So yes, we need a stronger commitment to NATO from both sides, maybe to a global NATO. And I foresee a global NATO, a push by the Biden administration. I mean, this is an idea out even of the Clinton administration still, and then has bipartisan support. May not have been supported by Trump, but even in the Trump administration, I saw a few heads speaking those ideas. So America will seek to hook up to India, to Australia, to Japan, and hook up to NATO, to a global NATO, to an alliance of democracies. And we should be ready for that. Remember when our chancellor didn't want to see a global NATO? I think if we get that proposal again, last time Obama proposed it and McCain proposed it, this time if we get another proposal, we should listen carefully, because that's an idea that is also for our interest. And we have been changing our outlook. We are not navel gazing any longer as we did even 2 or 3 years ago. We now understand that we do have also strategic interests in the Asia Pacific, and it's not the Mediterranean border that limits our vision. So yes, we have been growing up. Americans will be pushing their ideas, and I think that's a good start. And if we should get a serious proposal this time again to join the Five Eyes, the security alliance, we should also think about it, and maybe give our American friends the idea of even proposing that, because again, and that's a deal, if we have to give up economic interests, especially in future-oriented areas for the name of security, we are better able to trust on America's protection and shouldn't be wondering about it.
Yes, and if the threat is present on the Asia Pacific, it would make sense to have a more global NATO. But then as a follow-up to that, we've been talking about China a lot and the threat that China poses. Does Russia pose just as significant of a threat, or is that threat overplayed?
I have to be careful now. Even 15 years ago, it's almost 15 years ago, I said to the Russians in Moscow, if you were strategic thinkers and not only looking into the past but also in the future, you would realize that Americans will need you to contain China. So think about Nixon's approach. Nixon approached the then weaker China to contain the Soviet Union, and now Russia is somewhat smaller and then would be the partner of choice to contain the rising China. It didn't go well with the Russians. That's what I can tell you. They weren't happy because they want to be taken seriously, and they didn't take it well when Obama called them a regional power. But obviously the strategic thinking hasn't been there, and neither in Congress nor in the security services. I think at the end of the day, Americans will realize by their short-sightedness by pushing Russia into the arms of China. So keep pushing Europeans or Germans and others buying freedom gas. That only helps China to get its gas cheaper and forces Putin to play its Asian card. And the same mistake happens with Iran, by the way. So by pushing Iran off the oil market, and I understand that you do want to sell your freedom gas and Texas, Ohio, and Pennsylvania where I play. But fracking is done when you know a bit about economics. So fracking is done for the foreseeable future. So let's not cloud your strategic thinking by some past-oriented, short-term economic benefit thinking. Think like strategists, think like Henry Kissinger would think about China now being not the power that can be engaged. That's the strategic thinking in the US right now. So no more engagement. It's decoupling. And if you're serious about that in the US, then stop making mistakes by pushing Iran and Russia into the hands of China.
Interesting opinion there. In a lot of these geoeconomic and geostrategic competition, we see the importance of the information that is shared amongst powers and throughout the world. So we hear a lot about disinformation campaigns, fake news, hybrid warfare. And going back a little bit to the Trump administration, he's often been accused of spreading misinformation and of accusing the media of not being trustworthy and of spreading fake news as well. This has exacerbated what we call the post-truth environment, the post-truth world that our age has been characterized by, especially with the advent of social media. Has the world been dramatically impacted by this rhetoric, and has it been impacted in ways that cannot be reversed? Can we ever reverse the post-truth trend?
I think we see a trend that has been going on for some time. I'm a huge fan of Popper and his concept of open societies and the key of rationality and science. And when I was a few days younger, engaging in research on think tanks in the US and Germany, an elder colleague told me, Joseph, we are living in a world of rational ignorance. People in the US have to work 2 or 3 jobs to stay afloat. So they are rational by remaining ignorant about most of politics and especially foreign policy. But how do you communicate with them in this world of rational ignorance? Communicate with people that are for rational reasons ignorant. We wrap it into value paper. And we have different kinds of value paper. We have a hierarchical thing. Is it what God would have us to do? And the others that are more individualistic is freedom, apple pie, and some other stuff. So you wrap it in some value paper that has nothing to do with rationality and science. I first really understood what he meant when I listened to George W. Bush's speech, more or less giving a go for the Iraq War. Where he abused religion, and now people who are never Trumpers abuse religion to justify this war with not rational terms, but he abused religion, checks his speech, and I could see the effects, how that really changed people's perception. So my point is, Trump has been just jumping on a bandwagon of a very long trend in the United States of discrediting science for religious reasons, but also for business reasons. Homeschooling may be a concept to most of you. I mean, people who are homeschooled don't believe in Darwin's evolution theory. That's one point, and I could go on here. But what's more important is interest groups. they discredit science. They discredit what we now know. Climate change is man-made, and so government has to intervene. Government has to tax, has to do this and that. And if you don't like that as a businessman, that you are taxed, you put in a lot of money, and you buy some Willie who has a Harvard affiliation to claim the opposite. So to discredit this 99% of sound evidence, you put in a drop oil of a bucket of solid water scientific research, and you discredit it. So you keep government out of their businesses. So there has been this discrediting of science going on, and Trump is just a symptom of something really deeper that is going on. And when I look how Americans now cope with Corona and the disbelief, and we have the same problem here in Europe. I mean, you know, we are immune already against intelligence. We have a herd immunity against intelligence, and I think it will take some more time if that's true, that we will be immune against Corona, because it would take some smarts to get a vacation, and not a vacation, a vaccination and a vacation thereof, to really get that done. But I think people will fight against that, and so people are anti-science, and that's not only an American problem, that's a European problem too. But that's why we hopefully do our job to get some more reasoning into the thinking. And there are two different kinds of thinking. Kahneman really put it down. Fast and slow thinking, and sometimes we have to slow down to really think, because the fast thinking is just like acting as if the mammoth were chasing us.
So it's not necessarily irreversible then. We can still
never. We have children. We have to look forward. The economists, when you look at the purpose of the economists, they have been fighting stupidity for decades and centuries now. So we keep going on in this fight, and generations after us.
Well, hopefully we can defeat this phenomenon.
We have been enlightened, and we don't go back into the dark ages, even if it looks darker at some points in history.
Josef, thank you so much for this insightful interview. I really had a nice time talking with you this afternoon.
Same here, Suzanne. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to our next chat.
Thanks, and to our audience, thanks very much for tuning in again to Security in the 21st Century. Stay tuned for the next episode.